Hey everybody, welcome to a special wrap-up edition of the Techstrong Gang from the Kubecon show in London. We're going to just talk about some of the high points that we didn't get to last week and maybe add a little retrospective insight. We'll be back in a minute. Hello everybody, I'm Mike Fizzard, and as I said earlier, we're still in London. At least we were last week when we recorded this. This is Guy Currier, Chief Analyst for Visible Impact, an arm of the Futurum Group, which is also the parent company for Techstrong, which is the parent company for DevOps.com and all your favorite websites out there. Guy, we've been here, or we're here, for 3 days in total.
Yeah.
Looking back, what leapt out at you? What's the thing that you're going to go home and take away and remember? Because, you know, there was 1,000 things over the last 3 days.
Well, there's a bunch of things, Mike. I would say one highlight to me was the welcome addition of or expansion anyway, of some virtualization names here. That was nice to see. I've been saying for years that we can all get along. Virtualization and containers should coexist, should not be put against each other. So Nutanix is here in effect. Now, granted, Nutanix bought D2iQ last year, and they've now renamed it NK. They've gone through a few renamings. NKP, Nutanix Kubernetes Platform. So that's a big reason for them to be here, but they're also here with their standard virtualization story. And then Platform 9, too, which I think you guys mentioned on the show last week. They are not strictly a virtualization shop, but it's a private cloud shop. We're talking about resource sharing and pooling and utilization across networks, storage, and, of course, compute. So that's an interesting thing to see at a KubeCon.
True that. And, of course, we see VMware is here.
Oh, yes, let's not forget VMware.
And the truth of the matter is...
They've been here for a while.
Yeah, the bulk of Kubernetes installs are running on virtual machines for the isolation, right? I mean, we've been talking about Kubernetes on bare metal forever, but, most people still don't do that. And the primary reason is that they want to be able to isolate those workloads and have some separation in case there's a breach. So when I look at this, I always, it's been one of those things I scratch my head about, because VMware is typically managed by IT administrators, and then you have Kubernetes managed by usually a DevOps software engineering team. And we've been talking about the collaboration of those two teams getting closer. And I wonder, though, in real life, it seems like maybe they already are. They just have pretty clear separations between who's managing the underlying VM and then who's managing the clusters for Kubernetes above.
I don't know. So I think in real life, actually, there's been a fair amount of separation. What did I say last week? What is a platform engineer? A platform engineer is a coder. But is a platform, I was being a little provocative, I suppose. A platform engineer is managing essentially a stack that provides services to applications. And it's important to know and be able to run and operate whatever that stack is. Does that stack include a virtualization layer? Maybe, maybe not. I don't think, though, that there has been enough sort of, let's say, maturity in the containers side of things. It's been growing and building and maturing rapidly. But one of the things I think we're seeing here is a little bit more of a merging. A little bit more collaboration. I guess what I'm trying to say is, no, I think it's largely been separate because of the strong association of containers, despite their capabilities, the strong association with cloud native, the strong association with DevOps, and applications are not being recoded and refactored at a great pace out of the older, more traditional models into that model. It's really new applications, which has allowed organizations to build new environments and run them, or let's say new estates and run them separately. I don't think so, Mike, not from what I've seen.
Well, that's always been the big question, right? To what degree do I refactor an application to make it run on Kubernetes, or Do I just kind of only use it for greenfield applications and go from there? Some folks have encapsulated, massive applications, and they
Yeah.
just call them a big ass microservice.
Yeah, but so that's the whole point. That's the whole point. I was just talking to one of the vendors here about this. Originally we had what? We had infrastructure, OS, hypervisor, OS, app, right? It wasn't long before we were able to get rid of or just use the kernel and have bare metal hypervisor on the server, right? Now we add containerization. Where does that go? That goes what? You can do, like you were saying, bare metal hypervisor with OS, container, OS. You can even, in some ways, remove the OS. You can also, there's a lot of different stacks that you can have to abstract the pools of to pool and abstract the resources that are essentially hardware underneath. Don't we want to be able to adapt those to the particular need and application? Adapt that stack in order to really do that in a resource optimizing way, in an efficient way that also delivers whatever performance or availability or regional geography you need. You really need to comprehend the whole thing. And I think the presence of Nutanix, the old presence of VMware, these other vendors, is really indicative of how containerization and cloud native is moving deeper into the enterprise and being encompassed in an entire plan a lot better.
All right. And just to add one more wrinkle to that, you can also use something, there's a project over here called KubeVirt that started with Red Hat, and you can use that to take the VM and run that in a container on top of Kubernetes.
Yes. No, that's been going on for a while. So here's the thing. Which of it is sparkly bits that make things look sexy and interesting? Like, I would say, pardon me for everybody doing it, but bare metal Kubernetes, okay, versus what you were really alluding to, which is the reality of having to actually deliver applications, not at perfect performance levels and all that stuff, but balancing, like every enterprise needs to do, how much investment you're putting into it versus how much you're getting out of it.
I'm going to shift the gear a little bit. There were a couple of new emerging technologies that I saw that kind of leapt out at me. And one of them was this K-Agent thing built by Solo.io. It's really a open source framework for letting AI agents communicate over this MCP protocol that the AI community is adopting. I think MCP was originally developed at Anthropic. And it provides the framework for all the communications. It's essentially the interoperability and networking between the AI agents that'll run over service meshes and Kubernetes, because most of these AI apps are being built on this cloud native framework. As we kind of get into that whole space, do you think networking in the age of AI is going to be fundamentally different because we're going to have all these AI agents and the level of scale required? The protocols seem like they're going to be different. They may sit on top of our foundations, but there seems to be a new layer of abstraction between the AI agents that's emerging.
So networking is it's really fundamentally different. It's going to be fundamentally different all the way down to the hardware. They're starting to talk about, so you've heard of the Smart NIC, right?
Sure.
The Smart Network Interface Card. There's a subcategory of that called the AI NIC. There's two planes, really, to the impact, or two planes of networking that are involved here. One is ingest and one is out, service, right? Ingest is really important. Whether it's prompt data or collection of data for training or any of that other sort of thing, the demand level is really high. And then on the back plane, for training as well as for inference, the speed of communication and the quality of that communication from GPU to GPU or from cluster to cluster is really important, right? These have markedly different profiles in terms of how the packets are put together, what kind of security or encryption is required, and also the usage, let's say the usage levels and how those change over time. Obviously, when you're training, you have a whole lot of bandwidth going on in the backplane. And then in the front end, for usage and inference, that's where there's this huge... One of the really interesting things that I saw here, another really interesting thing that I saw here, was a discussion by Google and ByteDance at one of the keynotes about how supporting AI inference is an extremely complex thing from the standpoint of container orchestration and infrastructure orchestration. That applies as much, if not more, to the network, because the degree to which, like, the volume of different types of models and their usage and what purpose they're being put to, it changes the profile of processing to a great deal. It also changes the profile of network usage. And I'll just say one last thing about this. Why is this so important and why is it so deep? A whole lot of stress is being put on the CPU. Now, if you talk to the ARM folks, they'll tell you, hey, the CPU can do it all. And maybe with certain RISC architectures, that's true. But what we're seeing is this diversity of chips, diversity of processor units. It's not just neural processors, it's ASICs, it's, field programmable gate arrays, it's the rise of the GPU, different types and styles of GPUs, different data types being used by GPUs. But one thing that the CPU has still had to do is traffic management, head node, all that other sort of thing. And that means network management. And so another specialty processing unit is the data processing unit or the network processing unit that pulls some of that duty away. So really, the attention on the network has always been pretty good. It needs to sort of be modified and go up in the age of AI for all those reasons.
I think what you're talking about also plays to this platform engineering conversation that's going on, because when I look at that, I say, all right, great, right workload for the right chip, but there's no magic compiler that manages all of that. So you have to know a lot about these different processors if I'm building software, and that requires more of a team of people to go manage that. And I think that's part of this effort to centralize some of the services, because not only do I want to make the developers more productive, but asking them to figure out, what workload to run where optimally is it's a bridge too far. So I think we need some expertise in here that's going to step up in the middle of that and be the infrastructure layer managers that say, all right, you built that, we'll figure out where best to run it.
This is so funny because you're taking me back to our eWeek and CIO Insight days, when the mainstream chip vendors, led by Intel, of course, were introducing multi-threading, and we started to write about the fact that you had to understand and program to the, all the way down to the metal, was how you put it, because now it's not just in the compiler either, right? I mean, you want the tool set that enables the outcomes that you're looking for as a developer. But by the same token, if you don't know what's possible in the platform, you can't really at least architect that application the right way, let alone code for it, AI or no AI.
And I'll turn to another favorite subject, because since I mentioned platform engineering and they're here, but Spotify is here and they built Backstage. Backstage is an open source internal developer platform, very popular among a lot of folks. But they are now offering a SaaS version of this thing that they will host for you and run for you. And they had an interesting keynote presentation when they were talking about what a difference it is to build something for yourself versus now trying to build and maintain and update something for a community. Yeah. And they had to change the whole back end, and now they're changing the front end. And all these factors change the way that they think about it. There's only a handful of end user companies that I've seen that have ever built an open source project that gained any traction and handed it off. And who knows, maybe they'll spin out Backstage as an independent company one day. But there are end users here, and we talk about making contributions to the open source community, but it's not easy. So
I'm so glad you're mentioning this. Yeah. So I just said a moment ago, I really think this has changed just in the last 6 months, that you're seeing a lot more focus on the enterprise. Open source it's been largely a domain, not largely, that's unfair, but the public sector in terms of and the organizations in terms of contributions to and co-development in all the projects around, open source generally, Linux Foundation and Cloud Native Computing Foundation particularly. Okay, so all this activity, it's security related developments, it's large landscape like multi-cluster management, like that sort of thing. These are rising in interest in this community as what I referred to, I think, yesterday as sort of the invasion of the enterprise by cloud native is occurring. And this merger, we were just talking about it in the context of virtualization. But here's the problem, Mike. This is what I wonder. It's like public institutions tend to have this sort of democratic flavor to them. And people can work on open source, have their entire job be contributing to open source in an environment like that. It's democratic, it's collaborative, it can take a really long time to build up. Once it's built up, it's an unstoppable force. Enterprise has a long and storied history now within open source of utilizing open source without necessarily contributing to it. I worry that the two do not mix very well. That engagement by the enterprise in order to help their adoption of cloud native is going to be largely on the taking side and not as much on the giving side, because at the end of the day, there's not going to be so many Xerox PARCs out there that are just doing things anymore. Mm-hmm. And especially as the economic climate shifts, as it seems to be real time right now, that could be a really difficult relationship to maintain.
Yeah. I was talking to some of the maintainers about that, and as much as they would love to have some additional contributions on the code side, you know what they really want? They wanted feedback from the enterprises about how this thing is actually running in a production environment so they could use that to drive the next iteration of the thing. And apparently they're just struggling with a lot of the enterprises. They're using stuff, but they're not talking much about it and not even participating all that much inside of those communities. And what they're desperate for is the feedback.
But that's a perfect example of it. That's a contribution to the community that would help. You know who would help? It would help those enterprises' competitors.
Well,
and there's a culture against that in general in a capitalistic enterprise. That's the nature of the beast.
There are a lot of forks of different open source projects because somebody in that enterprise decided to add something or tweak something that they didn't contribute back to the community. Yep. So there's a lot of iterations of different things. I also think, though, that there is this notion of there are certain things that are not trade secrets. And you can share with the community. You just got to be smart about it. But I do believe that Coke and Pepsi can sit in the same room and have a conversation about Kubernetes that would be helpful to both.
Yeah, it does not sound like something that, the Federal Trade Commission would worry about.
Right.
Exactly. If they were to collaborate on soda formulas, that might be a different matter.
Yeah. There might be some lawyer screaming his head off about this, but, probably it would be just tell him to chill out. It'll be okay.
Don't you think that the way tech has developed, especially in the last 5 years, has raised, and not just because of AI, has raised this sort of consciousness of the importance of tech among, business management, among enterprise management? And don't you think, therefore, they're going to worry more about people sharing Kubernetes ideas than they would have in the past?
It is true. The business execs...
That's wild to think about, but...
It cuts both ways, right? So business execs are definitely more tech savvy than they were 5-6 years ago. But as a result of that, they are conscious of what are we sharing? But at the same time, they also understand better what is differentiated value and what isn't when it comes to tech. So, they can have that conversation up front that says, yes, you can talk about this, this, and this, but not that. Right?
I don't like that. I don't like that. Let your R&D folks R&D. It's really part of R&D. It's part of R&D. And you invest in R&D, and people who are working in R&D, including the syrup formula for chemists or whatever at Coke and Pepsi, are going to conferences themselves and meeting other people and sharing, food chemistry knowledge.
I will give you a theoretical example. If I'm a financial services firm and somehow or other I figured out how to make Kubernetes run a little bit faster, I might not share that because that's a competitive edge.
You definitely would not share that. That's precisely what I'm talking about. So let me shift the conversation just a little bit here. So that is one trend that I feel I'm seeing in comparing KubeCon to KubeCon is more project focus on areas of interest to the enterprise and more of this enterprise slant to the development of cloud native and enterprise adoption of cloud native. Great. The other one, though, and this could just be me, and that's why I wanted to ask you, the other trend I'm seeing is chaos. Did we use that word yesterday? Chaos.
I think
There's something
at some point we talked about get smart. So yeah, it was.
Yeah,
chaos.
there's this chaotic feeling to the. I feel like there's something a little bit overwhelming, and I'm concerned that it's overwhelming to the market, to architects, to adopters, to users, about how cloud native is developed. I think I felt it most with the addition of Open Infra into Linux Foundation, which is a great development, terrific development. At that point, I was kind of like, oh my God, what's going on here? Have you just not, have you felt the same thing?
There's definitely a lot of chaos and there's a lot of do-it-yourself kind of feel. Stitching all this stuff together,
and so many things to do it yourself with. It's coming at you from every direction.
There are people talking about platforms more. VMware is certainly down that path. Heroku's here talking about PaaSes, and Cloud Foundry is sitting in the back end of this thing, waiting for everybody who's embracing platform engineering to figure out that a PaaS does 80% of what they want to do. So what's old might be new again soon.
Yeah, who was it? It was Cisco on stage yesterday, who was saying that one of the learnings from this whole endeavor of cloud native is don't build solutions, build platforms that a lot of things can plug into and interoperate. But she immediately said after that, the problem is that there is so much to choose from them. There's so many choices to make.
Right. And not only do you have to make that choice, but then you got to sell everybody else in your organization on your choice. And for IT people, they're not necessarily built to go and sell something. You hear it all the time, go manage your platform like a product. Well, these aren't product managers by any stretch. They're, IT people, and then they're going to go into a room and kind of try to convince a bunch of people that says, yeah, use my platform, because they can't order people to do something. They got to kind of convince them to do that. But that takes a lot of effort. And so these platforms, they're going in one at a time on a different use case, and they're kind of hoping that by word of mouth, everybody will come around to their way of thinking.
Yeah, and then if they don't, that project heads towards, a sunset, or what's it called, like decommissioning or something like that, and they've invested in something that's not quite going there.
Well, yeah.
What do they do with it then? I
think that's called Darwinism at work.
It is Darwinism at work, but it's also DIY at work. It's also assemble yourself. So there are these two kind of competing approaches to stacks. Let's get really parochial, stacks. Trying to run an application has to run on a stack. One is the best of breed approach. This exemplifies the best of breed approach. I'm not just going to, and best of breed doesn't mean, somebody's put it on a listing or in a quadrant or whatever and it's number one. It means for my set of requirements and for my purposes and for the needs of the application, this is the best, whatever it is. The other is the single source approach. The single source approach takes all that complexity and gives it to a solution provider. And the solution provider offers you the application, or maybe the platform or some layer within the stack, essentially as a service managed, and don't worry about what's happening underneath. That appeals to a lot of, enterprises because of how they operate.
Well, let's remember how we got to where we are, right? A lot of the teams that wound up building all these platforms embraced DevOps because they wanted to get out from under the thumb of centralized IT. And so what they don't want to see happen is somebody showing up, waving a platform engineering flag to go back to the bad old days of CIO totalitarianism. And so they got to figure out a way to reduce the number of platforms so the cognitive load isn't so high.
Yeah.
But we still have to, have our cake and eat it too, and the developers are going to want to see some flexibility so that when they decide that they want to use some new tool to go experiment with something, there isn't some IT guy telling them no.
You remember when the cloud architect came into existence, more or less?
Mm-hmm.
It became, so that was a little bit pre-hybrid. Well, it was sort of the cusp of hybrid and pre-multi-cloud. The purpose of the cloud architect became a policy setting function. Here are the 12 VMs you're allowed to use in this cloud, you're not allowed to use that cloud, like that sort of thing, right? I wonder if there's that, or maybe there is already, you tell me. I wonder if that's in a sense where platform engineering is going as well.
Yeah, it's got its roots in that for sure. I just think cloud architects drew a lot of diagrams, but nobody implemented them. So that was kind of where the...
Well, the platform engineers won't allow that because there's only going to be one place you get to run your sandbox, and everything rolls out from there.
So I think we're trying to strike a happy medium. It is a negotiation for sure, and it's not something that is a flick of the switch kind of thing. But I will tell you something that I was impressed by here, and as I listened to almost every keynote had the same kind of...
And then I'll give you one thing I was impressed by, yeah.
One little vibe that was apparent. Almost every keynoter got up and said the same thing. They said they were hiring. And in this current economic climate, that was an interesting trend. And I'm starting to wonder if cloud native may be counter-cyclical, borderline recession-proof, because the software development is becoming more strategic to all these companies. And maybe, if you are looking for work, maybe you should get those cloud native skills, because almost every company here, it looks like me, like they're trying to hire some folks now, but you got to have the right skills.
That is, I did not notice that. That's encouraging. That's encouraging. I'll give you something that perversely encouraged me that I noticed is not a lot of system integrators here, at least not in effect. We know that it's given up the enterprise ghost, let's say, when we start to see especially the globals here, the big ones, because that's where all of this intellectual property, this quasi-public domain intellectual property that everybody gets to contribute to and use, starts to really get pulled away and walled off. And
yeah, so I'll make a couple of predictions for next year. Things we will see. One is more of those SIs. We'll also see more managed services around platform engineering, where someone will say, I'll manage that on behalf of you, and we'll let your developers kind of build out. You've already seen, most of the consumption of cloud services in the enterprise is through some sort of managed service. I think it's just a matter of time before they start adding a couple of more layers, CI/CD, IDPs, and they'll call that a managed platform service.
yeah,
And a lot of people will start to invoke that. And then I think this time next year, we'll all be talking about how to manage all those AI agents that are now part of the DevOps workflow as I go build all these cloud native applications. And I can't tell you right now, are those AI agents, are those just another type of employee, or is that just something that I'm managing and supervising? Who knows?
I agree with you. Those will be big topics of conversation here. I can't make predictions like you can, so I won't. I do think that the what I'm calling the chaos, maybe that's the wrong term for it, but this let's say, increasing kaleidoscope of options and methods and everything, I think it will grow. I think it'll grow. I think it's going to get more evident before any of it, starts to sort of percolate and organize. Projects don't shut down particularly often. And that means that there are a lot of, and that in a lot of ways, that's a good thing to have a lot of different options for doing some stuff that's similar or that's the same. But at some point, it does need to start to normalize.
Projects do die, though. It's a slow death. And one of the things you have seen folks starting to really do is they're measuring, like, what is the active level of contribution into a given project before they bring it into the enterprise, because they're using that as a health metric to say, is this thing active? Because if it isn't, I don't want to, be dependent upon something that is either A, going to fade away, or B, some vendor's going to, announce tomorrow that they got a whole different licensing approach for it because their investment in that strategy wasn't panning out for them. But now I'm tied up in this, shall we say, more restrictive licensing option that they're providing me. And then, the response to the community is, well, we'll just build more forks, and then all hell breaks loose.
Yeah. There's got to be a solution for that at some point. What happens in private enterprise is usually by contract, there is some sort of migration or transition strategy. I don't think that really exists in this community yet, but maybe it's time for it.
And there are vendors who, shield you from all of that. So whether it's a distribution of Kubernetes that comes from a vendor, or any number of the platform providers, whether it's Mirantis or somebody else, they vet all that stuff before it comes to you. And if it goes south, it becomes their problem. So one way it's like an insurance, and one way is to isolate yourself is, that's primarily Red Hat's mission when you think about it, is to provide the enterprise with some level of isolation from the chaos.
That's the right model, right? No one's saying that nobody should make money off of this. The greater, choice an enterprise has or an organization has as to whether go full DIY or go full solution should depend on their goals, their business model, their culture, and their style, not on what's available. And I will say this is maybe my reason for apologizing a little for using the word chaos. What do you do in the face of chaos? You try not to get FOMO. You try not to worry about what you're not seeing, and you just pick what you're seeing and go with it, and make sure you're understanding and measuring the results. And that's true of those different approaches as well. So at least you have those choices. At least this proliferation of projects, and a lot of it is really necessary. Multi-cluster management, infrastructure provisioning, secrets management. These are all areas that need a lot of development in cloud native and in open source.
All right. I'll let you have the last word, my friend.
The last word is, let's keep going strong. Techstrong. No, let's keep going strong. Let's make sure to breathe and have perspective and stay out of religious wars, tech-wise, so that we can feel like we're making progress and we have opportunities. And as long as we are understanding what outcomes we're getting, we can deal with all of whether it's chaos or the invasions or any of those other alarmist terms that I've used.
All right. I'm going to quote Michael Jordan. The shot never taken is always missed, right? So cloud native.
Exactly.
Take the shot, because the opportunity and the upside is far greater than any potential nuances or inconveniences you might incur along the way.
Yeah, and as usual, he said I would have the last word, and then he took the last word.
I guess, well, you had the next to last word.
Okay. I'm happy with that.
All right. Hey, folks, thanks for watching the latest episode of the Techstrong Gang. You can find this episode and others on our website. We invite you to go look for all those past episodes, as well as stay tuned for the next round of shows that are coming up right behind us, because, well, it's tech. It never ends, changing all the time.
Yep.
That may be chaos on one level. I call it fun. We'll see you next time.